Have you ever watched a river? Just sat and observed how it's constantly moving, never the same twice?
Yes. That image of ceaseless flow. It's very powerful.
It really is. And it strikes me how much our own lives are like that river. You know, our thoughts, feelings, circumstances, they're always shifting, transforming.
In constant motion. That's the nature of things.
But isn't it strange how we as humans seem to fight against that? We crave stability, permanence. We want to build dams, maybe?
We do. There's an instinct for safety in the familiar, in what feels solid. We think if we can just hold things still, we'll be secure.
Right. But it feels like that very resistance, that trying to grasp something that's inherently flowing actually causes more struggle.
It often does. It's a paradox. The tighter we cling to the idea of permanence, the more unsettled we can feel when reality inevitably shifts, like trying to hold water in your fist.
Exactly. It just slips through. And this reminds me of something central in Buddhist thought, right? This concept of anicca.
Anicca.
Yeah.
Yes. Impermanence.
Impermanence. It sounds simple, but profound. Like everything changes. Everything.
From the smallest breath, the flicker of a thought, to mountains and stars, nothing remains fixed, including ourselves. We are also part of that flow.
Wow. Just taking that in, it feels huge. If we really accepted that, truly.
It changes how we relate to life. Understanding anicca isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a way to soften our resistance, to maybe suffer a little less when things inevitably change.
It makes me think about how we get stuck. There's that story, isn't there, about the monk Sona?
Sona, yes.
A good example.
He came from a wealthy background, right? Used to comforts.
He was a merchant before he became a monk, and the transition was difficult for him.
I can imagine. Missing the old life, the comforts, maybe doubting if he could even handle this new spiritual path, that fear.
Yes, the fear of the unknown, the discomfort of letting go of the familiar. He felt anxious, overwhelmed by the demands of his new life. It's a very human experience, isn't it? Definitely. We all have our own versions of that, I think. Holding on to old merchant habits that don't fit our lives anymore, maybe.
We do. Old identities, old ways of being. They can feel like anchors, sometimes holding us back.
So Sona goes to the Buddha looking for answers.
He did, seeking guidance. And the Buddha's teaching was beautifully simple, rooted in nature.
Not some complex theory.
No. He asked Sona simply, "Have you seen a mango tree?"
A mango tree, okay.
Sona, of course, said yes. And the Buddha pointed out how the tree naturally sheds in old leaves. It lets them go.
Right, to make way for new ones, for fruit.
Exactly. It's not a loss, you see. It's a necessary release, a condition for new life, for growth. The shedding allows the flourishing.
That's a really gentle way to look at letting go. It makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we cling to jobs, relationships, habits, even ideas about ourselves long after they've stopped, feeding us?
We do. We stay because it feels known. Safer, perhaps, even if it's constricting.
That illusion of safety, it's powerful. We'll probably circle back to why we hold on so tight.
It often stems from that fear of the unknown. The familiar, even if unhelpful, feels predictable.
But the core message here from the mango tree is that change isn't the enemy.
Far from it. Change is the process. It's life unfolding. It's the very mechanism of growth, of becoming. An invitation, really.
An invitation to expand. I like that.
And it's interesting, this ancient wisdom finds echoes in modern understanding too. Psychology tells us something similar.
Oh, how so?
Well, the brain does seek familiarity for safety, that's true, our survival wiring. But constantly avoiding the new, the challenging, it can actually keep us small.
Right. We miss opportunities for growth if we always play it safe.
Exactly. And conversely, when we approach change with a sense of openness, even curiosity, it seems to activate parts of the brain linked to resilience, to creativity. We become more adaptable.
So understanding impermanence, Anicca, isn't about being passive or resigned.
Not at all. It's about becoming more skillful in navigating life. Instead of fighting the current.
You learn to swim with it? Or maybe even dance with it.
Dance with it, yes. That's a beautiful way to put it. Moving with flexibility, with grace, rather than rigid resistance.
Okay, that sounds lovely in theory, but how? How do we actually start to cultivate that? It feels like a big shift.
It can be.
Yeah.
But the first steps are often quite simple, quite direct. The Buddha suggested. Just observe.
Observe what?
Your own experience. Notice how thoughts arise and disappear, like clouds passing. Don't grab onto them.
Okay.
Notice feelings too, how they surge and then subside, like waves on the shore. They aren't permanent fixtures.
Right, emotions definitely come and go, even intense ones.
They do. And reflect too. Look back at changes in your own life, times that felt difficult, maybe scary, but looking back now.
See, they led to something good, something unexpected.
Often, yes. Unexpected gifts, new strengths discovered. These simple acts of observation, of reflection, they start to loosen the grip of our resistance.
It's like training the mind to see things as they actually are, not just how we wish they were.
Precisely. Seeing the constant flux directly. And in that seeing, there's a kind of freedom
Freedom from the struggle against change.
from the suffering that comes with clinging to illusions of permanence in a world that is inherently and beautifully impermanent.
So maybe we can reframe change, not as this scary thing, but as a teacher.
A great teacher, always showing us something new about ourselves, about life. We are, like the river, designed to flow, to adapt.
And embracing that flow, that impermanence, that's where real peace might be found.
The deep peace. Not because things stop changing, but because we understand that change is the nature of things. And within that understanding, anything feels possible.
But it's not always a peaceful dance, is it? Sometimes change feels less like a flowing river and more like standing on the edge of a cliff. There's fear.
Yes, fear. That very primal response. It's powerful, the instinct to pull back from the edge, from the unknown.
It feels so real, so immediate.
It does. Our minds are wired for survival, to perceive potential threats. Uncertainty often registers as a threat.
And that fear, it seems connected to what we were talking about earlier, holding on, attachment.
Deeply connected. In Buddhist understanding, this is upadana, this tendency to grasp, to cling.
Cling to what, though? Not just physical things.
No, to people, certainly, to possessions, yes, but also to ideas, to outcomes we expect, to our self-image, who we think we are.
Like invisible threads tying us down.
Exactly. Anchoring us to the past or to a very rigid idea of what the future must look like.
It makes sense. Thinking about big life changes, maybe losing a job or a relationship ending, there's often intense anxiety. And maybe beneath that anxiety is the fear of losing something we're attached to, like the identity tied to the job or the feeling of connection.
That's very often the case. The anxiety isn't just about the new situation itself, but about the perceived loss of what we were clinging to. It creates this internal friction, this tension between reality and our desire for things to stay the same.
I remember hearing about a conversation, was it between the Buddha and Ananda, his close attendant?
Yes, a very poignant exchange.
They were walking in a forest, and Ananda was struggling with this whole idea of impermanence.
He was. He expressed a deep sadness, a worry. If everything we love, everything we cherish, is bound to change and pass away, how can we ever find true peace?
That question hits deep. I think everyone feels that sometimes, that ache of knowing things don't last.
It's a universal human concern. How do we love, how do we live fully knowing that loss is inevitable?
And what was the Buddha's response?
Again, he used a simple, powerful image. He pointed to a flickering flame. An oil lamp, perhaps?
Okay.
He asked Ananda if he saw the flame. Ananda said yes. Then the Buddha explained that the flame only burns as long as there's fuel, as long as there's oil.
Right, when the fuel runs out.
The flame goes out, it ceases. And then the key point, attachment upadana, is like pouring more oil on that flame.
Pouring oil, so attachment fuels the clinging, the suffering.
It intensifies the desire to hold on. It makes the eventual inevitable change feel more painful. It prolongs the burning, you could say.
Wow, so by clinging, we're actually feeding the very thing that causes us pain when change comes.
In a sense, yes. We amplify our own distress.
And Ananda's worry about losing cherished things. That's something we all face. We see change and we immediately think loss. Loss of security, loss of love, loss of the familiar.
That's the common equation we make. Change equals loss.
But the Buddha's teaching, the mango tree, the flame, it seems to hint at something else. Could these endings actually be beginnings?
That is the invitation, to question that automatic equation. What if letting go, even when it hurts, creates space?
Space for something new to arise, something we couldn't have imagined while we were holding on so tight.
Perhaps something even more aligned with who we are becoming. It requires a shift in perspective, away from seeing change solely as threat.
And it's really interesting how neuroscience seems to be catching up with this too. You mentioned the brain's response.
Yes, the fear response. It triggers the amygdala, that ancient part of our brain, fight or flight.
And if we're constantly resisting change, constantly in that fear state,
it can actually strengthen those negative pathways in the brain, make us less flexible, more reactive, more prone to seeing threat where there might just be difference or opportunity.
But there are ways to counteract that. You mentioned mindfulness.
Practices like mindfulness, which have deep roots in these Buddhist teachings, help us develop a different relationship with our thoughts and feelings, including fear.
How does that work?
By learning to simply observe what arises in the mind, thoughts, fears, anxieties, without immediately reacting, without judgment.
Just watching them.
Just watching them, like watching clouds drift by. You create a bit of space between yourself and the intensity of the fear. You see it as a temporary mental event, not necessarily the absolute truth.
So you don't get swept away by it quite so easily.
Exactly. It allows you to see change more clearly, perhaps less as a personal attack and more as just the way things are, part of the flow. Maybe even, as you said, transformation.
Transformation.
Yep.
That leads me to think about the butterfly.
Ah, the butterfly. Another beautiful image for this process.
The caterpillar, in its chrysalis, it must feel safe, maybe, enclosed.
For a time, yes. Protected.
But then comes the struggle. It has to fight its way out.
It does. And that very struggle is crucial. It strengthens its wings. It's what prepares it for flight.
And if you try to help it, cut open the chrysalis.
It wouldn't survive, or wouldn't be able to fly. The struggle is necessary for its transformation.
So, resisting change in our own lives. It's like trying to stay in the chrysalis, preventing our own wings from developing.
It's a powerful parallel. We deny our own potential for growth, for flight, when we resist the necessary struggles that change often brings.
Okay, so if we recognize this resistance, this fear, this clinging, how do we actually start to loosen its grip? What are the practical steps?
Well, the Buddha suggested starting with awareness. First, identify your attachments. Gently. Honestly.
What am I actually holding on to so tightly?
Yes. Is it a specific outcome I need? A certain image of myself I'm trying to protect?
Yeah.
An old dream that maybe doesn't fit anymore?
And the key is no judgment, just seeing it.
Just seeing it, acknowledging it as part of being human. We all form attachments. It's not about shame. It's about understanding.
Okay, so identify the attachments. Then what?
Then perhaps gently challenge them. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of here? What's the worst case scenario I'm imagining?
And often that fear is maybe exaggerated, based on assumptions.
Often it is. When we bring it into the light and examine it, it can lose some of its power. We see it's fueled by imagined futures, not necessarily present reality.
Makes sense. And the final step?
It's perhaps the deepest. Cultivating surrender.
Surrender.
Yeah.
That sounds passive, like giving up.
It can sound that way, but in this context, it's not resignation. It's more like trust. Trusting the process of life itself. Recognizing that we can't control everything.
Accepting that some things are just beyond our influence.
Yes. Releasing the exhausting effort of trying to manage every single outcome. It's an act of alignment with the flow, not a passive giving in.
It comes back to the river again, doesn't it?
Always. Learning to navigate the currents with grace, rather than fighting them. Trusting that the river knows its way to the sea.
Trusting that even in the messy parts, the rapids, there's still a direction, a purpose unfolding.
A trust in that deeper unfolding. A trust that every ending truly does contain the seed of a new beginning.
So maybe the invitation for anyone listening is to reflect. Where am I resisting change right now? What fears are holding me back?
And to see that fear not just as something to avoid, but maybe as a signpost.
A signpost pointing towards growth.
Exactly. Pointing towards an edge where learning and expansion are possible if we're willing to approach it with courage and openness.
So by facing the fear, understanding the attachment, and learning to surrender, we actually gain more agency, not less.
We reclaim our power. Not the power to control life, but the power to navigate it wisely, with less suffering and more grace. We might even discover, as Ananda perhaps began to understand,
That the thing we fear losing
holds the very key to our freedom.